So my name's Patrick. I'm a public health biologist, or more colloquially, tick guy for the islands. I'm a Dukes County employee working for the boards of health under a public health grant, the Inter-Island Public Health Excellence Grant. So I think I'm just going to give a little background before I get into prevention. Apparently, this is a state-funded grant. 250 groups across Massachusetts are receiving some state funding to give public health or local boards of health more funding and more resources. So this is kind of touching on what the last question that was just asked. I exist, and this job exists, and this resource that we are providing exists because of the health agents. They are the ones that fought for me and fought for a tick biology position. And actually, I get pulled in so many different directions, always wanting to go. People are asking for me to go on the Cape and do other talks all over the place. So this is something that's needed. And there's other extension agents, like I believe Plymouth County has an entomologist on staff that can also kind of talk to some of these tick problems and tick issues. But we are trying, and that's, again, like Dick had mentioned, like it takes time and money to kind of build that capacity and that effort so we can really, truly educate the community. So I'll just jump straight into personal protection. I give lots of these talks. My business card is on the back table. I have lots of information I can talk about with ticks. I could, like as mentioned before, I could drone on for 3 hours just on this topic alone. So if you feel like you're missing something, I'm here year-round, full-time, so you can grab a business card off the back of the table. My emails are up here. My main email through the county is biologist@dukescounty.org. And then through the tick program, or through my job as the public health biologist, we have the Martha's Vineyard Tick Program, which has been a grassroots effort since 2011. And that email is more of like a public-facing email, and we have a yard survey program. So if you'd like to have a private consultation with me at your home during the main tick season, you can reach out to mvticks@gmail.com and contact me. Those emails are open for any tick-related questions, but I can share slides. So, because I truly believe that prevention is some of the most important things when it comes to the whole tick concerns. So we'll jump right into it. By and far, wearing permethrin-treated clothing is the #1 thing you can do for tick prevention. I've got, I think, 8 tips here listed for tick prevention or disease prevention. The first 3 are really the only ones that prevent bites. And these are the ones that I focus on. I think my greatest testament is I've been here for 4 years doing this job. I hunt, I hike, I fish, I visit at least 100 properties a summer, and I visit trails regularly throughout the summer season for work. I've been bitten twice in the last 4 years. Both of those bites came this past June, and it was my own fault because I was not listening to my own advice. And I'll show you exactly which tip I wasn't listening to. So I was wearing permethrin-treated clothing, and by and far, this is what I trust to do in my job. This is how I can do my job comfortably. You want to treat from the ground up. Sometimes having just the bottom half treated, but if you want full protection, you want shoes, socks, pants, and shirt. And I'll get into that, why that's kind of a hard sell. And that's like the worst part of permethrin-treated clothing is you need to cover up and cover exposed skin. The idea is to keep the ticks on the treated clothing and off your skin. What I've read about permethrin is that after a minute of exposure, any ticks are dead. 90% of ticks are dead an hour later. So it has an outright toxic effect on it, and it's a neurotoxin for the ticks, and it paralyzes them. And as far as I've read, it's completely safe for us, and there's really no adverse health effects when used as directed. The biggest thing about permethrin is it's only for treating clothing. It's not for use directly on your skin. But permethrin is long-lasting, so there's multiple ways you can treat your clothing. You can buy bottles of permethrin locally. I've seen it at SPS, Brickman's, Basics, Shirley's Hardware, some of the other hardware stores around. It'll be sold anywhere you find bug spray or bug repellents. It's just you want to read the active ingredient and make sure you're getting permethrin, and there'll be instructions on the back of the bottle on how to use it. So you can buy bottles locally and treat your own clothing, your own shoes, your own outdoor gear, and that, once it's dried, so you don't really spray your clothing as you wear it, you just set it out on the ground, hang it in the garage or something, spray it till it's damp, and then let it dry for 2 to 4 hours. Once it's dried, those home applications will be effective to wear for 6 weeks or 6 washings. So it even lasts through the laundry. And that's what I have at home to do all my footwear. And I just set a reminder on the calendar on my phone to just remind me to retreat every 6 weeks, which I put about 40 days to give me a couple extra days to remember to actually do it. Because that's one of the hard parts about tick prevention is it requires a little bit of a behavior change. And sometimes it can feel like a chore, so it can be hard to kind of include it into your routine. But I would say, like, with these tick prevention tips, I live pretty comfortably on this island, and I kind of do what I want when I want outdoors, as long as I'm dressed appropriately. Outside of the DIY, doing your own clothing treatment, there's a company called Insect Shield, where you can buy brand new pre-treated clothing from their online store. Or, which I highly recommend, you can take the clothing you already own, mail it to them, and have it professionally treated for about $9 a garment. We have a discount code with Insect Shield. They've actually been a good partner to us for trying to spread awareness on the benefits or the effectiveness of permethrin and trying to help us get more permethrin into the hands of folks here. So we have a discount code, which you can take a picture of the flyer on the back display table, but it's Martha's V 2025 for 15% off at Insect Shield. I highly recommend. That's what I do with all my work clothing. I have bottles of permethrin at home that I spray shoes with, and I can touch up other clothing that I need to, especially like during hunting season for some bulky clothes that I don't want to mail off. But all my work clothing, all my recreation and hiking clothing, I just mail it to Insect Shield because they treat it, and their treatment lasts 70 washings. So it lasts all year long, and I think that's a huge benefit, and it's really fairly priced for $9 a garment. So I usually send my clothing off in February, March when I don't need it as much, and I'll send anywhere from 3 outfits, 9 garments. And this past March, I sent 15 garments to be treated, and the total cost was like $115, which I think is so fair for the effectiveness it is protecting you against the ticks here. Next slide. So these are kind of the examples of what you would see of permethrin in the store. On the left-hand side, all those bottles, those are what you're going to treat your own clothing with. The nice thing about permethrin is it's all a standard 0.5% concentration. So to me, it doesn't really matter what brand you buy. It's all the same permethrin. Just make sure you're not buying permethrin and confusing with some other repellents that I'll have on the next slide. The yellow bottle, go backwards, please, thanks. The yellow bottle of the Sawyer permethrin. Yeah, the yellow square bottle, that's the typical one that I buy because I think you get the most fluid ounces per price. But in the end, different brands, doesn't matter. I think I've seen the Repel brand or Coleman brand sold locally here. Those are the DIY treatments. On the other side are like the professional treated and the wearable items like Insect Shield clothing, and you'll hear a lot more from Paul about TikToks, which he's modeling for us today. And again, in the next slide, I'll get to why these are important. And if I was wearing something like this, I wouldn't have had the 2 exposures I would have had this year. And I would have continued to say that, I've been here 4 years and I've had 0 tick bites, even as outdoorsy as a person that I am. So there's wearable items, and typically anything you buy pre-treated comes with Insect Shield treatment or that long-lasting 70 wash cycle treatment. Next slide. So tip number 2, and this is the hard sell. This is the tough one to convince people to do in summertime, is you want to cover up as much as possible and cover as much exposed skin and tuck the clothing in. And that's why I got bit, because I wasn't tucking my pants in. And that's kind of what the togs are designed, but I won't get into it too much. I'll let Paul explain. But I was wearing a full permethrin-treated outfit when I got bit. I was not tucked in at my pant legs, and I was off trail in the brush in the middle of June. I got bit on Father's Day this year. I was asking for it. And I kind of laugh about it because I'm here, teaching people to, prevent bites, and I'm not listening to my own advice. So obvious on the left is what we typically see in the summertime. We've already referenced this painting over on the wall. And it's like typically people are in open-toed shoes wearing shorts, which kind of exposes them depending on where you go. You'll see I'm wearing shorts today. This is probably the 5th time I've worn shorts this summer, which is the trade-off I make and the sacrifice I make. And that's why covering up and tucking your clothing in can be a hard sell because it's 85 degrees and 90% humidity here. But I talk to plenty of people that are just, they don't hike anymore, they don't garden anymore, they really just don't go outside anymore out of fear. And I want to at least give you a little hope and optimism that if you dress appropriately with a full treated outfit, I feel comfortable going where I want, doing what I want. I'll walk through chest-high grass this time of year during my surveys, and I'll just keep my hands up in the air because those are the only exposed parts of my body. Ticks getting all over my treated clothing, but usually after 30 seconds or a minute or two of exposure, they're either falling off or they're having enough effect where they can't really crawl and walk anymore. So the middle slide, obviously, a little bit better is closed-toe shoes and taller socks. Still has some exposed skin on the legs, but generally more covered up. And if you're doing any type of heavy outdoor work or hiking, obviously you want to dress on what the character on the right looks like. Shoes, socks, long pants, long sleeve, and all tucked in. And if you want to make these, you kind of want to use your clothing as a barrier and just permethrin treat it for like the ultimate tick preventative. So again, you kind of want to use clothing as a protective barrier. Tucking your shirt tail and pants is just keep the ticks on the clothing and off the skin. And like I said, if I was following that rule of tucking in, I wouldn't have been exposed in June like I was. Both were Lone Star ticks that bit me. I got bit on Father's Day, and a week later, different ticks. And I was like, all right, I'm not messing around anymore because I might have gotten a little lax over the years with my tick preventative because I just haven't been getting bites. But I learned my lesson this year, and I've gone back to tucking in or using some of these wearables to cover up. But there's things like tick tape. I've seen it at SBS that you can, it's double-sided tape that you can use on the outside of your clothing to trap them and stick them to something. And there's a company called Rhino Skin, which they market clothing as bug bite proof. I just it's not treated in any way, so for folks that it might be adverse to permethrin or some of these other repellents, they do make clothing that is not treated. But in the end, I don't really think ticks have the ability to bite through clothing like a mosquito would. So if anything, just regular clothing would work if it's not treated. But having the treatment on there, sometimes I like to have the tick crawling around in my treated clothing because I know it's doomed. Next slide. So number 3, which is again, these are the bite prevention, is use effective repellents. And I'm always going to recommend EPA registered repellents. The most common are going to be DEET, picaridin. I don't have much personal experience with picaridin or picaridin, but I've heard people say, because DEET is a little greasy and oily, it's kind of gross to use sometimes. That's what I have in the back of my truck. In the end, I don't really use much DEET when I have a full treated outfit. Picaridin, I've heard, goes a little bit dry or a little bit smooth, so it's sometimes nicer to use. But you want to use an EPA registered product because they are proven effective, and we know how long they've been effective for. So there's a tool called the EPA Find the Right Repellent tool for you. So you can go through and search, and it'll bring up a spreadsheet of all the different products. There's probably 500 different DEET products with DEET on the market. Some of the other listed registered repellents, they're not as common. You're not likely to find them in the store here. But again, they have been tested for efficacy against ticks and mosquitoes, and they have been tested for human safety. And repellents have their place where they're more convenient to use. They can go directly on exposed skin, and that's the biggest benefit to them. So it's a good mixture of things where I have repellents and permethrin at home. Like the repellents can be used by the back or set by the back door for your guests and visitors. You can spray yourself as you're walking out. I've talked to people that exclusively use DEET as their tick protection here, and they never really used permethrin clothing. And again, the repellents can go directly on exposed skin. What makes me nervous sometimes, I have a lot of people saying, oh, permethrin, I've been using that every day on my skin. I was like, that is not how it's supposed to be used. That is not what the instructions say on the back of the bottle. They go and grab the bottle of repellent they actually been using. It ends up being picaridin or picaridin. So they're confusing that active ingredient. So that little image on the slide, or the middle, when you're shopping for repellents or permethrin, cover up the label on the bottle and read that active ingredient, which will be in fine print on the bottom left or right hand side of the product. That's what you're making a decision on. Most labels are going to say it's safe and effective. So just look for the active ingredient.
because I think what most people don't recognize is I think the deed only lasts a couple of hours.
It depends on the formulation. So if you use that EPA tool and type in DEET, it'll bring up a long spreadsheet. And what I've seen is DEET will be rated effective anywhere from 2 to 10 hours, depending on the formulation. And again, that's why I'm such a big permethrin promoter, because last 70 washings are much, much longer once you apply it. But again, DEET is still my choice of repellent. Next. Yes, so you want to use these products because it might be really hard to see on this picture, but I've got a blown up image on the back of the table. This is courtesy of Sam Telford from Tuckernuck Island, I believe. And it's hard to see, but each little individual dark splotch is an individual tick bomb on his leg. So he's probably got 10,000 little tick larvae crawling on his pant leg right now. And notice how he stopped and took a picture. He didn't set his leg on fire. He didn't take off his pants and go running through the field. He stopped and took a picture because it's really interesting. This is one of the worst pictures I've seen for a tick bomb on one person. I would guarantee that his socks, his shoes, his pants were all treated. That's why he feels protected. And I guarantee you, 5 minutes after that picture was taken, all those tick larvae had rained off him and fell off him, and it had the effect of the permethrin. And even if the tick doesn't immediately fall off or want to get off the permethrin, again, after a couple of minutes of exposure, you know the tick is doomed, and it'll start to have paralyzing effects. So next slide. So you want to use, again, so here's another great example of Sam self-demonstrating on himself for the sake of public health. It's, again, hard to see. So he went out larvae sampling, and the tick larvae are so small that they can crawl between the fibers of a sock. And so you'll see on his left leg, he was wearing an untreated sock. It's covered in bites. It's got at least a dozen bites around his ankle, even though he's wearing probably tall crew sock. On the right leg, not a single bite on his right ankle because he was wearing a permethrin-treated sock. Because again, the ticks, after a minute or two of exposure, they should be paralyzed, not able to bite, and certainly not able to stay attached and feed. Next. Oh, that's supposed to be an animation. This is a slide of doing a tick check. And I was going to end it with just saying, just do it. Sponsored by Nike. You don't really need to see the slide. It was just tick prevention number 4 is doing daily tick checks. You've probably heard it all your life. Obviously, a tick check may not prevent the bite, but to me, tick checks are the best disease prevention tip. Because like it's mentioned earlier, not all ticks transmit something, and the ones that are carrying something, it's often based on how long that tick was attached. So the sooner you get it off, and the more regular you do your tick checks, it kind of sets a baseline when you've been exposed, and it's better information. So doing regular tick checks, you have to do a whole body scan. There's obviously zones around the groin and lower extremities and around the armpits and scalp that are kind of hot spots, but I just essentially named the whole body there. So you want to check all over. I use a handheld mirror in front of my bathroom mirror and a headlamp or extra light during my tick checks. You'd be amazed how extra light helps with a tick check. And I actually appreciated Kelly's presentation about tick-borne disease and darker complexions, because I feel like that plays into tick checks as well. I don't have many pictures of the ticks today, but I'm concerned about Lone Star ticks because I feel like they match more my complexion. They match the skin tone of my freckles, my moles, and other things. So I think a Lone Star tick might kind of blend in a little bit better versus a deer tick, which is to me jet black. And anytime I get a little jet black dot on my skin, it really stands out easily to me. But that might be a different case for folks that are darker skinned. But again, using a magnified mirror or some type of mirror to check around the legs, the groin, those hard to see places, and then having extra light can really help. Tip number 5 is if you're thinking or if you're worried about ticks that might be on your clothing after outdoor activities and you don't want to trap them into the house, you can take them off and throw them straight in the dryer on high heat for 15 minutes. That'll kill any ticks. And that's a really good tip during larvae season where they can really get embedded in the clothing. I've had people concerned that they were having ticks in their sheets and other upholstery items. So if that ever the case, you can take them off the bed, kind of skip the washer first, put them straight in the dryer on high heat for 15 minutes. Ticks are really sensitive of drying out. So if I'm worried of having ticks on my clothing, I'll throw them in the dryer. But in the reality, for me, in the 10, 15 minutes it takes me to drive back to the office or back home from my field site, my field work, any tick that's on my clothing is going to be dead because I'm wearing all treated clothing. I've gotten home and had dead ticks hung up in the fibers of my clothing because their legs curl in, they turn dry and crusty, and then they just get hung up in the loose fibers. But again, that's kind of like a backup plan where if you're worried about stuff on the clothing or on fabrics, throw them in the dryer. If you don't have access to dryer, even just hanging the clothing outside in a sunny location can cause the ticks to kind of want to move away. Again, they can be sensitive to like direct sunlight and warmer temperatures. And sometimes you can almost treat like clothing as like contaminated items. Like you want to keep them outside just to make sure that any ticks on there, you're not bringing them into the house. And now we have ticks on the bed, on the couch, or crawling across the laundry. Next. So as mentioned already today, but have a tick kit. Have one to go, ready to go, in the car or in the house. But for me, a tick kit would include something sticky like a lint roller or tape, clear packaging tape, and you can use that to fold the tick, trap the tick and suffocate it if you're trying to, keep a hold of it. But a lint roller can be really good if you encounter some of those tick bombs before they bite. I always get the question if like the lint roller will remove an attached tick. As I understand, when the ticks bite, they excrete a cement and they're literally gluing themselves to the host. So I don't think a lint roller is going to remove an attached tick. That's why we need tweezers. But lint roller is great for tick bombs. Or I've talked to people that will lint roll their kids or their pets that come inside from like immediately after coming outdoors just to see if they can get any tick that might be crawling on the skin. But obviously you want to have tweezers at home, fine tip tweezers. I don't want to talk about removing ticks with matches, petroleum jellies, essential oils, or going for a swim for an hour. Just get that tick off as soon as possible. The longer it is on, the longer or the more elevated your risk becomes. And then again, a magnifying glass, I feel like that is almost just as important as having tweezers. A lot of folks that don't look at ticks all the time, like apologists, it's hard to identify a tick, especially with their size. So I think a magnifying glass and being able to ID the tick can be just as important as having tweezers to remove the tick. And again, a handheld mirror to help with those tick checks. I had a good tip. A resident said that, you can buy like a 10x magnified mirror from like the makeup aisle, and that can hopefully help make the ticks easier to see. Next. Last couple slides here. So this was brought up earlier. This is a great program hosted by University of Rhode Island called Tick Spotters, and it's a free tick identification service. So if you get a bite and you want to know what kind of tick it is, you can take a picture of it, mail it or email it to them through their website for free. And I think their policy is to respond within 24 hours. They'll ID the tick, ID the life stage, and give you a brief risk assessment based on the engorgement status of the tick. And like Aubrey had mentioned, some of the tick-borne diseases are unique to the tick. So if you know you're bit by a deer tick, there's concern for Lyme, there's no concern for Alpha that we know of, and vice versa. If you get bit by a Lone Star dog tick, no concern for Lyme. So IDing the tick that bit you can be important information for your doctor. Next slide. And then the last kind of thing is you can elevate that to the next level and you can pathogen test the tick. So this question was brought up. We always recommend tickreport.com. They make that data publicly available for local boards of health. This is not our first recommendation with what to do after a tick bite. And the biggest thing is if you test a tick and it comes back positive, it still really means nothing about your health. Sometimes information can be power, and I still kind of share the service with folks. And I've had lots of folks say that, they sent the tick off and it came back negative, and that gave them a little bit of peace of mind. But even then, you still need to monitor for any flu-like weird symptoms that may arise. I think Dick shared a story with me that's saying he had a close friend, got a tick bite, sent it off to get tested, tick came back negative, they started getting flu-like symptoms 2 to 3 weeks later, and they were going back and forth with the doctor trying to figure out what it was because the person kept saying, it's not tick-borne disease, the tick I tested was negative. Turned out they had Lyme the whole time, and they just delayed their treatment and diagnosis by a couple of weeks. So again, information can be power, and sometimes it can be helpful. Last slide. And then those are just, again, reiterating all the points. If you want to take a quick picture of that, we have the discount code with Insect Shield for 15% off, and then I'll let Paul talk about his TikToks and some of the other wearable items.
big slide.